이래 껴가 제벌 그가 있는 것이 다다수 미야 다수 다수 담보디 껴가 누가 있지 다수 미가 되게 겹 제벌 누가 이거지 참가 살지 못해 겹 제벌이 저 살지 못해 저한테 내가 인사니까 특별히 있어야 되구나 겹 제벌 that's we will jump together to the picture because we will take it. That the situation is intended to Thalam Children is different and to the separate from the children from the Congo to the children. Each Thalam Children maneuver, playing the children maneuver, if they children. Siva children they the vibration of the remember that I need a child language to she the only over but it looks at I never dangerous that that's it. Yeah. Jampa give but provided that the union provided no you look up so Jampa give indeed to provide nearest be community that then study government dance government teaching that then you to myself still now that that is if to infinities similar to the rule in the one Tambu to give a near Sundi. I remember to answer the rivers from temperature. Give a children longing but to the nations. You number Tambu to give a name. Any time to scientific party. Scientific party, but that is it is typically is that was usually
So, in just an overview of the subject matter of this chapter, text written by Geta Parampa, I think this is the final topic. The general heading for it is, what is the purpose? What is the almost value of this material? The one is, which we were discussing yesterday afternoon, was what was the purpose of determining that the master, the teacher, Rishika Muni, is the spiritual authority. And so we had various discussions yesterday that were largely addressing the fact that the qualities of being a Sugata and the qualities of being a savior sort of incorporate the elements that make the Buddha someone deserving to be viewed as someone that one would take refuge in. And so what were discussed were things such as the knowledge is sufficient to say that he has the ability to save us, but that does not guarantee that in fact someone who has that knowledge would in fact make use of it to provide that assistance to others. So then the element of compassion, something that will guarantee not only that he possesses that knowledge, but that he will make use of it. And therefore, in that sense, we can be confident and we can feel no need to have doubt that, in fact, if we rely upon the Buddha in the act of refuge, that we will receive that refuge. So that was kind of the main purpose for establishing that the Buddha is a spiritual authority, and that's really the meaning of the real spiritual significance of why it's important to understand that he's a spiritual authority, because he is one for us, especially in that he will provide us with the real meaning of refuge. And then the second element of the purpose of the chapter is to kind of validate, this in this author's presentation, to validate that the treatise, Pramanavarttika, particularly this chapter, is a correct treatise, an accurate treatise, and one which is Gyumed, one which is most excellent. So how should we understand the extraordinary nature of this particular presentation? So the first point that he makes is that we have those two series of presentations of the epithets, and the original, or the forward moving order of those four epithets is understood here as saying that it presents the entire path, the entire Mahayana path, that the Buddha Shakyamuni in particular, and any other Mahayanist who has the intention of pursuing that path, what are the essential elements in order to be able to do so? So that's presented, the entire Mahayana path is presented in the first part of the chapter. So then the reverse, the presentation of those four epithets in the reverse order should be understood as presenting the so-called common path. Common path meaning the path that's shared between the listener, practitioner, the followers of the listener's vehicle, and the followers of the Mahayanas, saying that the Mahayana path is not something that Mahayanas do not partake of. They must also gain knowledge of that path, and for various reasons, including that they will teach it to those for whom it's appropriate. But it is then the main path that's followed by those who are seekers of just their own liberation. And in the reverse order of the four epithets, the main subject matter that's taught extensively is then Tibetan Denshi Langor. Denshi means for truth. Lang means what is to be practiced in relation to that teaching. Dor means what are the obstacles that are meant to be discarded through that practice. So that's the entire path that leads one to liberation. So the Mahayana path in the first half of the verse, and the path of the four truths that leads to liberation in the second half of the chapter.
의도 승리하는 그렇게가 인지 강제 방법 제가 상대 모임이고 대중의 상대 의도 예시 근데 이제 가상 그냥 사는데 남의 무슨 것도 예시를 공부 제대 장가 그냥 대중이 빈도 그거지 대중 군주가 생계에서 생계 남의도 싫어 뒤집기 그 제가 생기기 있는데 남의도 싫어 뒤집는 많이 주 그래서 어제 뒤집는 많이 상계 상계 군주 뒤집는 많이 상계 군주 때 지난데 상계 군주 그런 지금 팀이 교수님이랑 상계 분들이 얘네 아까 되게 많이 상계 분들이 아니 상계 kim도 제가 상계 kim과 당 방법 개발을 제기했어. 대신 방법 개발을 제도 준비 방법 대신들과 방법 대신 원인이 있어. 이 지금 상계 분조 상황에서 이 분문에 상계 분조를 이게 다시 산 디버멘트가 상계 대시 명도는 말했더니 다들 상계 관계지 시기가 상계 그 이번 멤버의 상계 부분은 전체 이 말했지 상계에서 상계 부분에 지켜는 게 그런 상계 부분이 그런 투쟁이 어떻게 하는 말이 내가 상계 부분 지켜야 되는 거야 이 상계 상계 분들과 지금 지금 중국의 상계 분들이 교수님은 상계 분들이 어디 시대에 어디 저같이 상계 정가 방법 개발지 상계 정가다 나가 상계 정가 방법 개발 대신 분들이 원인이 지진의 상계 분들은 민주를 하던 이나라는 당연히 수도들이 시를 같이 생각 이내 지진이 주제가 사지 지진 분들이 자신 받아들 지진 분들과 사지 기분이가 빈도 분들과 제주 생각에 밥에 가서 안가 빈도 분들과 제주 생각에 캐는 게 제주 생각 캐는 게 잘 제주 생각 캐는 게 제주 생각 캐는 게 다기지 나 생기 있어 있는데 안에서 시를 teaching because teaching 생기 있는데 안에서 시를 teaching is 이게 좀 singular 이 teaching 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 다 논도 위치 중에 대해 쭉 분조선 시작입니다. That is
So, first point was that the entire path, both the Mahayana path and the first half of the chapter, is established, proven, and the entire Hinayana path and its results are explained in the second half of the chapter. So these are extraordinary qualities of the presentation that make it worthy to be considered an extraordinary treatment. And that's one point. The second point is that those two presentations also can be shown to identify and explain the nature of the three ratnas according to the Mahayana path in the first half, and the nature of the three ratnas according to the Hinayana path in the second half. And so there's a great deal of philosophical discussion that can be brought to bear on the difference between the Mahayana form of the three jewels versus the Hinayana form of the three jewels. So let's just start by saying how the Mahayana three ratnas are described by the author of this commentary. And he says that the person who possesses omniscience, in the spiritual sense of omniscience, then is described as having the three qualities of having abandoned fully all the obstacles. That's sugata in the first order of presentation. And so that abandonment of all the obstacles is specifically in relation to the Buddha Ratna, represents the Buddha Ratna's Bhavakaya. So Bhavakaya, it's essentially the truth of cessation in the mind of a Buddha. So that's an element of the Buddha Ratna in addition to his knowledge. And that is representing the Buddha Ratna, and then in the Mahayana sense. And then the Dharma Ratna is, the Sangha, Mahayana Sangha Ratna is identified by the fact that the Buddha Shakyamuni's own Bodhisattva path is represented in that presentation. And so to the extent that Buddha Shakyamuni as a Bodhisattva, or any other Bodhisattva for that matter, who is motivated by compassion and the extraordinary form of compassion that wants to aid others, feels responsibility for others, and culminates in bodhicitta, then that's particularly the first attribute. The person who possesses that, and then who, with that compassion, then also cultivates the wisdom, meditates on wisdom, and had reached the point where that bodhisattva has achieved a direct realization of selflessness, right, as represented by the second attribute in that first presentation, then that represents the bodhisattvas who make up the ultimate sense of the Sangha Ratna in the Mahayana path. And then finally, the wisdom that is perceives emptiness, and which is informed by, or which is under the influence of the aspiration to achieve enlightenment, that wisdom that perceives emptiness is one of the main aspects of the Mahayana Dharma. And all of those elements are contained in that first presentation. So then one can say various things about the three ratnas and how the Mahayana version is distinguished from the Hinayana version. So in a general sense, the Hinayanists take refuge in the Buddha Ratna. In an overall or in an unqualified sense, they take refuge in the Buddha, the same Buddha that the Mahayanas take refuge in. But there are certain distinctions that can be made. And then there's some further distinctions that can be made about the Dharma Ratna in particular, as to what that constitutes for a Hinayanist, how they understand the Dharma Ratna. It doesn't have the quality of necessarily being that wisdom in the mind of a Bodhisattva, for instance. They will describe it differently. And furthermore, the Sangharatna would be even in the I don't know that takes Guluga Temen Papa 기득권을 자기로와 자기 말 자기를 왜 기득권 썼나 대체그 no okay so the Mahayanists would not consider the Hinayana Aryas as part of the Sangharatna. They would require that there be a Bodhisattva Arya in order to be the genuine form of the Mahayana Sangharatna. On the other hand, we can make the distinction that the Hinayanists believe that there is a Buddha. They believe that the Buddha's path was undertaken in such a way that there was a Bodhisattva, so they would believe that there is such a thing as a Bodhisattva Arya, but they wouldn't necessarily recognize such beings as representing the Dharmaratna in the Hinayana side. Okay, so the point is that we can make certain distinctions about the nature of the three Ratnas from the point of view of a Mahayanist versus the nature of the three Ratnas from the point of view of a Hinayana. In the first order of the presentation of short episodes, specifically, we can identify the Mahayana version of the three Ratnas. So that's kind of the point that's being made here.
That is, that's the digital like this. Giving to the share Khensur. Rajime Bato Chanjo Sufi Langto Yangton in the Chanjo Sympathy. That digital mind the king to the spirit. Taking Rajime Bato share the Chanjo Sufi with carrying my Jimmy.
So in this overall discussion of comparing the three Ratnas from the point of view of Mahayana versus three Ratnas from the point of view of both the Hinayana and the Mahayana, one way of differentiating the Mahayana Sangharatna from the Hinayana Sangharatna is that for the Mahayana, so there is a doctrine, there is a teaching, there is an element of the path that's associated with the 37 dharmas or practices that are conducive to enlightenment. They represent a series of groups of practices. They're Jampa, Shakshi, Yadabawanshi, and so on, up to and concluding with like the eight limbs of the Arya path. For a Mahayanist, the Mahayana Arya Sangha is one who is practicing those 37 forms of the path, or some elements of the path, but doing so with or having attained a realization of emptiness. means they directly perceive emptiness, so that represents the fact that they are Aryas in the Mahayana sense, and then they're still practicing forms of those 37 spiritual practices, but they're doing it under the influence of bodhicitta and also especially with an awareness of emptiness, which the Hinayanas, both of those qualifying elements, bodhicitta and wisdom, are not recognized as part of the Hinayana Sangharatna. So the Hinayana Sangharatna are practicing the same 37 practices, but not in a way that they incorporate the direct realization of emptiness, and they're not motivated by the aspiration to achieve light. So that's one way. So that would be, the former would be the unique Sangharatna. The latter would be the common form, the Hinayana form of the Dharma. Then in the case of the Dharma-ratna, so the unique Mahayana form of the Dharma-ratna can be associated with all those elements of knowledge that are related to those same 37 practices in the mind of a Bodhisattva Arya. Those knowledges, those would be elements of the truth of the path, would represent the unique form of the Mahayana Dharma-ratna. So the Mahayana form of the Dharma-ratna is significantly different from the Hinayana form of the Dharma-ratna. The Mahayana form of the Sangha-ratna is likewise exclusive in nature, tumo mayimba, and different from the Hinayana form of the Sangha-ratna. But the Buddha-ratna, we can say in a general way, is not significantly same. Both believe that the Buddhas have the unique 10 powers and other various attributes that are recognized as being unique qualities of the Buddha, and the Buddha is a person who achieved ultimate enlightenment. And so in some general ways, both the Hinayanas and the Mahayanas regard this Buddha-ratna in an overall similar way. 아니 루도기 태면 구주들한테 뒷등한 책자를
그래 등얘기 있습니다.
그쪽 태면들
계신 분도 등얘기한테 엄청 중요한데 상계 뒤시 중앙들 때문에 찬이 등얘기 뒤지는 상계 분들 특히 상계 뒤 상계 등얘기에 상계 분들 가르치는 상계 뒤시 중앙들 때문에 찬이 등얘기 리지다디 상계 분들 특히 대격의 체험입니다. 대격에서 가장 top-대인데 상계 분들은 신비를 두는데 상계 분들 세체를 받아요. 아까 기ገብ을 이해를 받아요. 한 대격에는 중립한 남지 상계 분들 체험입니다. 내가 봐. 내가 인생이
직접
이게 아니 이제 대신들도 비팅이들 공부 중요한데 뭐가 대신 나오들 때문에 참 비팅이들 지난 단계 공부했다는 거 가사기 담이 공부도 임무반에 보다 문도 제가 하바 비밀이 이게 공부 다시 공부 캐리가
그렇죠.
다들 지금 당연히 자신의 것들에 네 시험을 말과 자신의 것들에 네 이제 또베또지 시그리스에 네 이거는 이제 시그리스에 그거는 세레스에 다시 시그 가야 할 때, 그거는 이제 이렇게 있는 말과 먼저 제가 앞에 팀이 비교해서 también donde quiero volver a ser tiene que cumplir y cantar también porque quiero y pan y también porque era porque porque tiene que cumplir
So, continuing then the author's description of how the latter half of the chapter presents those four attributes in the reverse order, how that has a quality of identifying the three ratnas as they are understood in the Hinayana path. So the second half of the chapter explaining the Hinayana path, and it's also embodying the Hinayana notion of what the three ratnas are. Okay, so it says, so in the second half of the chapter is where the Four Noble Truths in their 16 aspects are taught or explained in the most detailed manner. And they're explained or described under the heading of the attribute of being a savior in the reverse order of those four aspects. That's the first one. So that the quality of being a savior in the reverse order is identified with the fact that the Buddha taught is the teacher, the one who taught the means of practicing the Four Noble Truths, right? He taught how to practice the Four Noble Truths, and then in his capacity as the one who reveals the path by which the Hinanas can, those persons who have that spiritual lineage, to seek their own nirvana, then in that sense, that attribute is describing the Buddha Ratna in Hinayana sense. Okay, so that's the first one. So that's the Buddha Ratna in the Hinayana system. Then the beings who then, so go down the road, we were addressing just those epithets as they're presented in the reverse order. So in the reverse order, then also then that wisdom, which is taught as the teacher, get to the teacher in the reverse order, for example, then that is the one attribute, one of the four attributes of that practice of the selflessness of the person, of the individual, not the selflessness of dharmas. The selflessness of dharmas is generally associated with emptiness. So in the Hinayana path, it's not the realization of emptiness as a means of eliminating the subtle obstacles to omniscience is not part of what is understood to be an essential element of the path. The essential element of the path and the realization that's the heart of the path is the selflessness, direct realization of selfless person. The person, then, oh wait a minute, what's right? So the Arya is the person who has meditated on the selflessness of the person and reached the point where that realization has become direct. And when that direct realization is achieved, some portion of the cessations of the obstacles of the mental afflictions are achieved. So those two qualities, the wisdom that perceives emptiness directly and the cessation that accompanies that realization, minus bodhicitta, minus direct realization of emptiness, that represents the truth of the path and the truth of cessation in the Hinayana path. So that's how to understand the Hinayana form of Dharmarata. Then the latter point is in I mixed the order up a little bit. So the Arya who possesses those cessations and that wisdom in his or her mind is then the Hinayana form of the Sanghara. Then also one point which not directly mentioned by an author here, but which is relevant to the way in which the Hinayanas take refuge versus the way in which the Mahayanas take refuge. There is a distinction between the act of taking refuge in a causal manner or in a causal sense, and the act of taking refuge in a resultant sense. In English, it's kind of an odd locution, but so Gyumed means taking refuge in a causal manner. Gyumed means taking refuge in a resultant manner. What the distinction between those two terms is, Gyumed means taking refuge in the three ratnas that have been achieved in the minds of beings other than oneself. So against the Buddha Ratna, the Hinayanas take refuge in the being who has achieved that enlightenment represented by Buddhahood, but they're not taking refuge in Buddha Ratna in the sense that that's what they want to attain for themselves. But in the Mahayana sense, there are two ways of taking refuge. One, you can take refuge in the same way. You can take refuge in the three ratnas in the sense of those beings who possess the attributes of the three ratnas in their minds, that you have not yet achieved. Or you can take refuge in a manner in which you are directing your attention to those qualities of the three ratnas that are your ultimate goal. So those qualities of the three ratnas that you are seeking to attain, taking refuge in them, in your own future enlightenment. That's your ultimate goal. And that's the resultant form of taking refuge. So the Mahayanas will take refuge in the Buddha Ratna in both of those ways. The Hinayanas will only take refuge in the Buddha Ratna in the causal way. So then in a more sort of comprehensive way, or in a summary manner, both of these presentations, the ones that teach the entire Mahayana path, the one the forward manner, the one portion that teaches the Hinayana path, in the reverse manner, we take them together, then they contain all the elements of the three elements of the Lamrim overall teaching system and practice system. Then the Gyumed, the lesser practitioner or basic fundamental practitioner, is practicing refuge and karma. And so that element is incorporated in the presentation. Typically, the path for the middling practitioner is identified with the three trainings: morality, concentration, and wisdom, based on an understanding of the Four Noble Truths, and motivated by renunciation. And that also is certainly presented in this treatise. And then the Gyumed element, the element that's unique to the Mahayana practice, is to be identified with especially 6 paramitas. So the 6 paramitas, if you recall, were one of the commentaries, I think there's a Khensur commentary. He points out that the second attribute in the forward presentation, the attribute of the teacher, he identified that with the active form of bodhicitta. The attribute of compassion he associated with the aspirational form of bodhicitta. So the active form of bodhicitta, because that teacher is explicitly addressing quality of wisdom, practicing wisdom. So then implicitly, the active form of bodhicitta practicing wisdom also incorporates the other 5 paramitas, and so all 6 paramitas can be associated with that attribute of the teacher, that teacher attribute. So the point is that one way of thinking of the entire chapter is that all of the Sutrayana and Mahayana instruction of the paramita vehicle are contained in this chapter, presented in this chapter.
That is
Also.
Jason is. And this Kevin, that is a word as
so then the kind of the final point that this brief overview of the material makes is that it starts out in short. It says this material then so it's making a connection between these particular points, right? So here we've taught the entire path system of both the Hinayana and the Mahayana. So that was first one. We've taught the nature of the three Ratnas from the point of view of Hinayana and from the point of view of Mahayana. So then those points were not just established on the basis of some assertion, and we should not just accept them on the basis of control authority, but rather these Buddhist scholars in this epistemological tradition have proven, have given us the means of, they have proven it through their own writings. By us learning, studying, understanding those arguments, then we can gain the same kinds of correct cognition, inferences, and so forth, about this subject matter, and then that form of knowledge will inform our practice. So that's going to be the final point that the authors make. So that there's a big difference between the person who has gained that kind of inferential understanding of the teaching and the method of practicing it and the validity of the source of the teaching. That person will practice it with greater clarity, with greater conviction, and with greater effectiveness. So then sort of the final point he's saying, therefore, there's great value to this one chapter, especially the second chapter of the Pramanavarttika. But he says, not just this chapter, he says, the great teacher, Dignaga, who formulated the 5 epithets in the first statement of homage in this chapter, Pramanasiddhi, Dignaga being a predecessor to Dharmakirti, the author of Pramanavarttika. And then taking those epithets, then it says, Rikpe Wangchu. Rikpe Wangchu means the Lord of Reasoning. The Lord of Reasoning is a reference to Dharmakirti. He's the one who's great logician, great epistemologist. Then Dharmakirti, took those 5 epithets and explained them in this extraordinary manner, in great detail, in a single chapter of his Pramanavarttika, his most extensive treatise on epistemology. It says, to say, so this particular author's work, this overview of the second chapter, is meant to inform us of how vast, how extensive, how detailed is the presentation that represents the subject matter of the second chapter of the Pramanavarttika. So he says, if the second chapter alone has such a vast amount of teachings in it, then needless to say, the other chapters of the Pramanavarttika are also equally detailed, equally extensive, equally remarkable, admirable, and so on. So he says, therefore, and so this is kind of his final statement. So for these reasons, for all of these reasons, then he uses the phrase Tema Dedun. Tema Dedun means the collection of 7 treatises on pramana, seven treatises on valid cognition, on knowledge, which are all authored by Dharmakirti. Right? There are 7 works that he authored, and then together with that, the Pramanasamutaya, which was his predecessor Dignaga's work. You take this body of literature collectively, then so because this material is not just about epistemology in the general sense, but more particularly, it is logically, on the basis of reasoning, not just scriptural authority, establishing the overall nature and the completeness of all of the paths that relate both to Hinayana and to the Mahayana. Therefore, Nangdung Rikpa nature. Therefore, Nangdung Rikpa means literally, it's literally the word means inner science. Among the 5 vidyas, 5 traditional sciences that are studied in classical Indian tradition, Adhyatma Vidya, Nangdung is what we would call religion in a loose sense. It's the inner science, the science of the mind and the spiritual subject. So Nangdung nature means that treatises, this body of literature represents a body of treatises that is most excellent. Means there are this particular group of texts. We should understand them to be extremely valuable spiritually. So that's very important that we appreciate what these epistemological works represent for us as spiritual seekers. And then the final statement of the text is, in support of that, the author quotes a brief passage from Tsongkhapa's great treatise on Tantra path of Tantra. So just as Tsongkhapa wrote a book called The Great Treatise on the Stages of the Path, he also wrote a great treatise on all the elements of the overall Tantra tradition. So that's called Ngagrim Jampa. That text says, in that text, the following passage is found that supports this final statement that the author makes. It's very important to recognize that the value of these epistemological works. Right? So this is Tsongkhapa's words. These treatises, plural, which are on the subject of reasoning, right? This collection of 7 treatises and the like, which are treatises on the nature of correct reasoning. So our teacher, Buddha and his doctrine, which he taught, both in its scriptural and its cognitional form. We know what that means because we discussed that. And and how to practice those 2 aspects of the teaching, the scriptural and the cognitional form of the teaching. Yamsu Lemba La means for us, that should not be something where we have a sense of reverence for the Buddha, which is mere words. We don't know why we have this reverence for the Buddha and his teaching. A lot of people seem to value it, so maybe I'll value it too. But rather, on the basis of this reasoning, we can gain the means of understanding for ourselves why they are so valuable, and therefore our reverence will be siktam, not be siktam. Siktam is mere words. I respect the Buddha, just words, not mere words, but genuine from the heart reverence. And so they are the means of developing that justified reverence, that reverence that comes from true understanding of the nature of the Buddha and the teaching which he presented to us.
That is a siktam member. That is Jika Sukaresana, Nungamji Kersun Piamari. And yes, I get any deal to get the Pias, and siktam member. 내가 친구들이 있습니다.
Yes.
나랑 내가 친구들이 있잖아.
So we can take some means mere words, and that's not. We can say, well, okay, let's take the three ratnas, for instance. Three ratnas are the object in whom we take refuge. So we can understand what is the Buddha ratna. The Buddha ratna is described this way. We can describe Dharma ratna is described this way. Sangha ratna is described. We can have a general understanding of that, and we can take refuge in it, and that can be a genuine act. But if you are able to understand those three topics, for instance, on the basis of reasoning, what is the Buddha in the sense of proving, as this chapter did, the three ratnas? What is the nature of the teaching, especially the cognitional teaching that represents the Dharma ratna, right? If we understand it on the basis of reasoning, then the way in which we will take refuge will not be ordinary, will not be the way a common person might. Not to diminish it, but to say there is an extraordinary way in which to develop those, even that most fundamental spiritual act can be one which is informed with correct reasoning, then it becomes something truly extraordinary. And if we appreciate that, then we will be more inclined to value the importance of the epistemological literature of Buddhist tradition.
나한테는 전부 근데 배치 잡아서 이제 자신 중요하지는 자신 아무런 그 중요한 것은 내주는 단지 그만이 되거든요. 이제 봤다 중요하지는 자신 그 상품 남주체 아니 자연스러운 공부 친구만으로 배워 이 이제 텐덴트 귀두만에 따져야 수능 아니 뭔가 친구만으로 배우니 레스트니 이 책을 내 지구지 레스트니 귀두만에 문제 다들 귀지 잠에대 귀지 문제가
Center.
잠에다기
Thank you.
네. 아니 공부는 이해해야 할까? 이해를 유지. 그래? 그런 민가 이해되는 뭐 공부는 생각하다 이해는 되게 유지에 가래 연원 출입 자반이 또 상대 그가 있는 beauty 그런 스쿨이라 아티냐냐 베데탄나기 또르 그가 출입 자바스 핸드스 beauty나 스쿨이라 논텐시 나 네.
So then, a final point is the author of Dharmakirti, the author of Pramanavarttika, is recognized as Dhammacittaddi Karsa. Dhammacittaddi Tumawe Shetumina Janjusemba Padlasam.
장주생과 분들은
Put some private. So sort of the in a conventional way. So there is a tumawa means then a way that is just a unique kind of distinction about how we can think of teachers. So in a more tumawa means in a common way. So in the way of that an ordinary person thinks, you could say, put it that way, in the way that an ordinary person would understand, or more likely to then appreciate those things. So from that perspective, the Dharmakirti is recognized as a bodhisattva, a genuine bodhisattva, who is in fact was in fact an emanation of the great 10th level Bodhisattva Samantabhati, considered an emanation of Bodhisattva Samantabhati. And so then in the certain text, a particular tantra says, in fact, that. And so it's considered to have been a prophecy that in the future, tantra having been spoken by the Buddha, he foretold that there would come a monk who would become a great teacher, and he was an emanation. He would be an emanation of Samantabhadra, and he would be known as the Pandit scholar, known by the name of Dharmakirti.
That is the Sanjay Sundari. And you can go into some doings and achieve it. Into some doings.
So saying that this is from a canonical source, from a tantra that makes this prophecy, and then Tumo Maimbe Ketu Tena Sangyera. So then
and the chief tells me, that's to make in the ticket soon. Another tomorrow, I can keep it and do Sandy. Yes, it is very sharp, but tomorrow, or near to the scientists. Now,
got
though, tomorrow, I said, do the channel. Pay chicken at the do something. Then I'll do the channel. So you clear that.
So then, look.
Tomorrow, I need to go.
So one way of saying that more common interpretation is from a Sutrayana perspective. And then it seems, what should I say? Fitting to describe him as an emanation of, it's fitting to describe him as a bodhisattva who was an emanation of Samantabhadra. It fits the overall kind of doctrine of the Sutra. From the unique point of view, Tumma Mayimba means then unique, then that often can be from the point of view of Tantra. From the point of view of Tantra, he's not a bodhisattva. He was not a bodhisattva. He was someone he was in fact enlightened. He was a Buddha who appeared in the form of a scholar, but in fact, his mind continuum was already enlightened.
That is very much Bugatti is an meeting the candle of the shape, number she remember that and the king can do it Mamut style. If you are the meeting, can buy it never come. But really,
So then, now that we've come to the end of this event over the last 9 days, then where we have gathered day by day and listened to this extraordinary subject with a pure motivation, then that activity has accumulated for us, has allowed us to generate great amounts of virtue, So, as is customary, then in order to ensure that that virtue contributes to the highest purpose, then it is appropriate at the end to um, hold that virtue in our mind and dedicate it with prayers to then a worthy goal. And so typically two ways of thinking of that worthy goal is that it should contribute to the longevity of the teaching, that the Holy Buddha Dharma should remain in the world for a very long time, number one. That should be one goal. And secondly, another principal goal should be that in whatever way possible, that our virtue should contribute in general to the well-being and happiness of other sentient beings.
아니 다 기타기 이거 강가 동발할 때 아니 맞아 수수수 아니 저만한 게 그네 때문에 남게를 가지고 남스나니 아니 마음을 쓰기 기타치 지키는 것이
and then in addition to that, then specifically in relation to the subject matter that we've been listening to, we should include the prayer in which we develop the firm aspiration that the subject matter of the Pramana treatise, how, in particular this chapter, how it informs us about the nature of the path and the result of the path and how to practice in relation to the path ourselves, that that knowledge should give us the ability to actually put that into practice ourselves, so that we can ourselves then ultimately attain the ability to be ourselves agents who can directly provide the happiness for others that we aspire to bring about.